The third and final game in the mainline God of War trilogy, this was one that I was truly hyped to play. That ending from the already amazing God of War 2 set this up to be a straight-up marathon of fighting gods and taking on Olympus, which I just couldn't wait for. But did it live up to my enormous expectations? Well... yeah, I'd say that it did. Let's begin by talking about the visuals. This game looks nothing short of incredible. Of course, it's on the PS3, so it's going to look better than the previous ones, but even compared to other games on the same system, this one is a true visual marvel with breathtaking set pieces. We return to Hades, which looks pretty awesome, though not as stylistically unique as the version from the first game, go through Daedalus's mind-bending labyrinth, and even go on top of a titan. This game doesn't hold back visually, that's for sure, and outside of a strange glitch near the end of the game where music was bugging out, I never experienced any technical issues, which is impressive for sure. And no, I didn't play the remastered version on PS4, I played the original PS3 one. It sure is crazy how much effort they put into the designs of the characters and enemies too. Each god looks very distinct and cool, especially Hades, like oh my god, his design is incredible, and mini-bosses like the Chimera, unfortunately not the same as the ones from the Resistance games, have an awesome look to them. It's a snake on top of a weird lion creature with two heads. How is that not amazing? A lot of other enemies are recycled, which is a bit disappointing, but it's what they've done to tweak how you interact with them in combat that matters, and that really makes the reused designs seem unimportant. Parrying, dodging, blocking, all of it feels much smoother than ever before and works flawlessly with such flowing movement to everything. You can now grab enemies and use them as battering rams, grab certain annoying enemies out of the ground, which makes them a whole lot less annoying than in previous titles, and use a wide variety of weapons in beautiful fashion. You now have a whopping 4 weapons. Sure, 3 of them are somewhat similar, but they're all incredible and fun to use. We of course have the Blades of Chaos, but we also get the Claws of Hades, which are purple claws used to rip souls out of people.
I don't think I've ever uttered a more awesome sentence in my entire life than what I just said.
There are also these gauntlets that work great for heavy, satisfying attacks against bigger foes, and this whip with the power to summon lightning. You can switch between all of these very fluidly, and it makes for some truly incredible combat that I found to be an absolute blast throughout the whole game. This game feels a lot longer than the other ones, even though it took me just as long as God of War 2 did, but that's because it's so much more complete and filled with stuff to do rather than because it gets stale and overstays its welcome like the first game. In fact, I was left just wanting more by the time I finished the game, but was still satisfied with what I had been given. That's the sign of an incredibly well-paced game. The combat is easily the best in the entire franchise outside of Ragnarok, bar none. Yes, better than God of War 2, better than God of War 2018. This is unbelievably addicting, satisfying, and constantly put a smile on my face with the crazy stunts and combos I pulled off, especially near the end of the game. This game also has the best difficulty of the older God of War games in my opinion, as there are multiple moments that are pretty damn tough, like really hard, but if you reach deep, you'll find the ability to do it. One of the coolest moments I've had in any video game in a while was seeing that message, "Do you want to switch to an easier difficulty?" Which I looked at for a few moments, thinking about it. This part was so brutal. Same with the final phase of the final boss fight. They were just so tough. But, put on some tunes, click that no button, and got to work. This game knows how to make you feel amazing and gives you the sense of empowerment that Kratos gets, as well as slaying the gods so consistently and brutally just feels right, even if it is pretty gross at points. Two other things have been changed majorly about the combat, namely the addition of a recharging item meter that allows you to use Helios' head to light up dark areas, stun enemies, and find hidden objects, Hermes' boots to run quickly, dash up and across some surfaces, and dodge in midair, and this fiery bow that is pretty helpful for some puzzles and fights. These all have multiple creative uses both for puzzles and combat, and are also just awesome items in general. I mean, it's literally the head of a god that you basically use as your own personal lantern. That's incredible. We also have a total overhaul of the magic system. Now we have one magic ability assigned to each weapon, which may have been controversial when the game came out, but I am a big fan of this change. It's a lot less overwhelming and allows the spells to influence your choice of weapon more deeply. I love it. These are the ability to summon souls for the Claws of Hades, a powerful stomp into the earth for the Gauntlets, the ability to rain down a phalanx of Spartans for the Blades of Chaos, and the ability to shock enemies with the Nemesis Whip. These all work pretty great in combat and, as I said, make the player think strategically about what weapon to use in what scenario, and swapping between them frantically in the middle of a fight adds so much to the experience. Some other more minor things have been tweaked too in order to make them more convenient. Pushing blocks is now much quicker, and QTEs are now assigned to the sides of the screen that correspond with where the buttons are on the controller. But what exactly do you do in God of War 3? Well, other than fighting normal enemies, you kill a lot of gods. I mean a lot, like more than ever before. In the first two games, you killed one god each, pretty much, excluding the Sisters of Fate, and the same for Chains of Olympus. In this one, though, oh man. First, we have a pretty incredible opening with a fight against Poseidon atop the Titan Gaia, which is just an amazing set piece in and of itself, not to mention a really good fight. Then we're sent down to the underworld and fight Hades in one of the coolest fights ever. His attacks are ferocious and creative, but in the end, Kratos gets the upper hand and kills him in a brutal, though kind of hilarious way. After this, we go on to kill Helios, which isn't much of a fight, but it's a very memorable and gory death scene for him. And the next boss is also not much of a fight, as it mainly consists of chasing Hermes in a very creative and fun platforming segment, which allows you to use the returning grapple ability in Icarus Wings, then fighting him briefly and killing him. Not the best boss fight or anything, but the lead up is pretty damn fun. We also fight Hercules, which is definitely a bombastic fight, that's for sure. It's pretty fun with you having to avoid getting knocked into these spikes on the side of the arena, and then when he's vulnerable, throwing him into them. Plus, his death might be the most brutal one of them all, but I didn't really mind because the character is a true a-hole, and his voice actor is arguably just as annoying in real life, so it wasn't so sad to see Hercules go. But then we have one of the greatest things I've ever experienced in any video game. The Kronos boss fight. This is more than a boss fight. It's a whole level. A triumphant, astounding sight for the ages, an unbelievable, mind-blowing spectacle that all must experience. It's the Oppenheimer bomb explosion of video games. You just need to experience it for yourself to believe how good it is. It's got some very creative and kind of gross moments, such as a giant monster coming out of a wound in the Titan's shoulder, or you attacking his fingernail because it's the only thing you can actually make a dent in. The spectacle of this fight alone makes it worth it, but the way it goes through so many creative fights, platforming segments, solid chase scenes all across Kronos' body, and even inside his stomach, solidifies it as one of the all-time best levels and or bosses in video game history. Then there's the extremely unique Garden of Hera segment, which feels like living inside of an M.C. Escher painting, and the gauntlet that is Daedalus' Labyrinth, which climaxes with an awesome battle against a giant scorpion. Sure, it's maybe not the most centered around Greek mythology, but it's an awesome fight on its own. And finally, we go head-to-head with Zeus once again. The story essentially follows Kratos' quest for vengeance and how Pandora, someone he meets who reminds him of his daughter, breaks through his tough exterior to expose the broken inner psyche. The fight with Zeus does a great job of displaying all of this too. I'd say it's the most interesting and complex of the stories so far, even if most of the best stuff is concentrated at the end. I think that's kind of the point though. Kratos' quest for revenge only shows its truly ugly side to him near the end, as he starts to feel that there may be something important outside of mere revenge on Zeus. The phases of the Zeus boss fight are very brutal, very creative, and super hard, like geez. This is easily the hardest boss fight in the series outside of optional ones like the Valkyrie Queen or Berserker King, but that makes sense. It's Zeus. He's supposed to be hard to kill. This fight really does feel like you're going up against an unbeatable force, starting out with a very tense, almost 2D fighting game style phase. This then moves into the second part inside of the heart of Gaia, which you need to hit in order to gain health and stay alive, especially because Zeus and his clones will tear you to shreds in this part. Like seriously, it feels almost impossible to beat. But when I finally did beat it, it was an amazing feeling of accomplishment. I had grown to hate Zeus just as much as Kratos did through that whole boss fight, and so it made his death feel so rewarding. The story climaxes here too, with Kratos being attacked by Zeus' spirit and having to reach deep into his mind, forgive himself for his past sins, and fight with the idea of hope, which he had previously dismissed as being for the weak, in order to stay alive. It's a really great way to bring everything from the whole trilogy around at once, showing a slight bit of redemption for the monster he has gradually become. He forgives himself for the killing of his family, killing Athena, and uses the hope that he can become better to defeat Zeus, who has been consumed purely by fear and paranoia. And in the end, hope defeats that fear. It's surprisingly profound for a game where you spend most of your time ripping monsters limb from limb. However, the ending does leave a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. I love the visuals, music, characters, acting, story, especially combat, pacing, puzzles, and bosses of this game. I love nearly everything about this game, but the way they ended it, I don't know, man. It feels like they didn't really know entirely what they were doing. Athena wishes to take the power that Kratos found in Pandora's box and rebuild Olympus with it, but in a confusing ending that I don't really know how to make sense of, Kratos kills himself and says his vengeance is complete. Wasn't the whole point of the story that he wishes to redeem himself and be filled with hope? This just kind of throws that away, and I didn't understand why they wrote it like this. This is until I saw the post-credits scene where they reveal that he actually did live, and now I think I might get it. At first I was like, why the hell did they pull the stupid fake-out death cliche on us? I hate that. But now I believe it's actually there to show how he deceives Athena. He tricks her into thinking Pandora's box was empty and that he has no hope by ending his life, but he actually survives and leaves her without knowing. So maybe it was all a giant ploy to stop her from knowing what was really in the box and allow him to carry its power with him into the next phase of his life. It's still confusing and should have been done more clearly and orderly, but if you think about it like that, it makes sense to a certain extent, I suppose. But in the end, I can't really say that hurts the game for me that much. As I said, it does nearly everything right and is the most fun, replayable, and addicting title in the classic era of this franchise. Not to mention a damn great ending to an iconic trilogy. Maybe part 3 isn't always bad after all. 5 out of 5. The second and final portable entry in the series is a very clear evolution of the foundation that Ready at Dawn laid 2 years before, with heavy influences from the mechanical shifts made by God of War 3 and a lot of truly great moments. The last portable game kind of just coasted by on its impressive visuals and inoffensive gameplay, but was too scared to really do anything unique or truly compelling. But this game is clearly more confident with how it introduces quite a lot of original ideas and a far more ambitious story. For starters, the visuals are even better than the last game, and many of the set pieces are incredibly imaginative. And I'm not talking about ones like Hades or Morpheus's Mist from Chains of Olympus that show up for just a little bit. I mean main major locales. The story is also absolutely awesome, like way better than it has any right to be. It's the perfect side story in my view, exploring deep into Kratos' past and family history in an encapsulating way without demystifying him to the point that it becomes an assassination of his character. Instead, it's an addition. In addition to this, the main villain of the game is far better, like infinitely better than Persephone in Chains of Olympus. It's not even comparable. In that game, I was honestly shocked that Morpheus, the character who they actually built up as a significant threat, wasn't the final boss, nor was he even a character you fought or met whatsoever. But here, the god of death Thanatos is mentioned throughout and given an absolutely jaw-dropping design to make him one of the best villains in the series up to this point. Honestly, in third or fourth place, in my opinion. Kratos' brother Deimos may only show up for a little bit at the end, and his mother also only makes a short appearance, but they use Kratos' past guilt throughout the game to build up to the ending very well, so that when you actually do meet Deimos, it's still comparably impactful to if he had been a leading character throughout instead of a flashback. Though it uses Kratos' memories of a bygone era very effectively for its story, Ghost of Sparta is anything but stuck in the past. They've made many great changes here to follow suit with God of War 3, such as the improved QTEs, parrying system, special diving attacks, and block pushing. Additionally, they've taken new steps to introduce some very exciting new mechanics such as Hera's Bane, which powers up your Blades of Chaos temporarily and is also used for specific types of enemies who can't otherwise be damaged. At the start I found it frustrating, but by the end they figure out how to work it into combat well enough so that you don't feel like you're just waiting around for the meter to recharge, but still need to conserve it strategically. Combat is pretty great, even if some enemies really got on my nerves, especially these wraiths. They don't make too many appearances though. The different parts of the game also offer a lot of great variety, with it essentially being bookended by visits to the pretty awesome and epic set piece of Atlantis, having really memorable fire and ice themed segments in the middle, and also including two truly stunning levels that really impressed me. First was Kratos' home of Sparta, which was honestly really cool to see and visually gorgeous for a PSP game. I wish it was a little more extensive because it goes by far too quickly, but it's still a cool set piece. And then we have the Domain of Death at the end, which may have one of the coolest names ever, but the actual atmosphere and design of the level as a gauntlet of tough enemies leading up to the final boss is even cooler. And finally, I want to talk about the game's bosses. We begin with Scylla, which is a pretty cool fight mainly due to the atmospheric location of a stormy seaside, but the actual design of the boss fight rings a bell, strangely enough.
Oh, I see how they did that. Self-plagiarism.
But yeah, it's a fine enough start to the whole ordeal, followed up by another alright fight against Callisto, which is not that impressive in terms of gameplay, just like Scylla, but the concept is, as the kids say these days, metal as fuck. A giant monster claws its way out of the corpse of Kratos' mom. It's absolutely bizarre, but I'm 100% here for it, just as I am here for the pretty incredible, epic, and impressive fight against Thanatos' daughter, Erinys. It starts out as a pretty normal, but much more intense and interesting fight than usual, then evolving into something truly incredible when she turns into a giant falcon, and you have to fight her in more inventive ways, especially as you fly through the sky and gradually break her armor with Hera's Bane. It's frustrating that they don't exactly tell you what parts you're actually controlling and what's a cutscene, just like this part right here where I spent literally 5 minutes repeating the same QTE because I didn't know you were meant to aim the child Kratos towards different parts of the mirror until I messed around with the controls.
And that's really weird, because usually I'm the guy, I'm the expert you go to for the exact right place to throw a small child.
But other than that, Erinys is an incredible fight, especially for a portable game, and her dad Thanatos is the final boss, and, well, let's just say, the poison apple doesn't fall far from the tree. The Thanatos fight brings Deimos and Kratos together in an epic finale, with Kratos giving him the pretty awesome second weapon of the game, a shield and spear that you can also use as a projectile, and then taking on the God of Death in a truly amazing way. This fight is legitimate perfection. It's got the feeling of scale as Thanatos transforms into a giant monster just like his daughter, and you'll have to combine every mechanic from throughout the game, from the many magic spells which, though quite forgettable and not as satisfying as most of the other games, are very helpful toward the end, to Hera's Bane and the help offered by her brother. Especially during these cinematic moments where the two attack him in incredible synchrony, it's just on a whole other level that blows my mind, considering this is a PSP game. And the ending? Well, I don't feel the need to tell you exactly what happens, but I do want you to just watch this clip.
By the gods, what have I become?
Death, the destroyer of worlds.
Yeah, they referenced Oppenheimer. What was it I said about the first game's themes of greed influencing conquest and war? Yeah, this is the best example of that theme being referenced in a later entry in the entirety of this classic series so far. It's awesome, it put a huge smile across my face, and I love it for that. So yeah, while it may have some segments that feel like they could have been longer, some weird glitches, some mechanics that feel frustrating at first, some of the lamest magic spells in the series, and doesn't remedy the lack of great puzzles and exploration that plague Chains of Olympus, it's got some absolutely incredible visuals, combat, boss fights, and story beats that make it a great experience throughout. And with the far more creative set pieces as well, this is just a flat out great game. This is a game that, if remade today, I'd gladly replay and could easily be made into a game close to God of War 2 and 3 in terms of quality, whereas the previous portable title would probably still be kinda lame unless it was completely rebuilt. Thus, I will give this game a very strong 4 out of 5. Even though it's been 5 games already, this game left me feeling satisfied with the franchise and not bored of it by the end. And now, as the trophy you get at the end of this game states, only one remains. The final game in the original series of God of War games taking place within Greek mythology is quite the interesting black sheep of the franchise. Sure, the weirdest and most obscure entry is most likely the mobile game God of War Betrayal, or the Facebook Messenger visual novel, what the hell? However, in terms of mainline, serious entries, Ascension is the most bizarre one, mainly because of the fact that nobody really understands why it even exists in the first place. Ascension is yet another goddamn prequel. Yeah, this takes place before all of the other games and is meant to be honest, I have no idea what the purpose of telling this story is or could even be interpreted as. It's truly that unnecessary. It's not like we get to spend time with Kratos' family and feel the sadness he does in the most potent way ever before when they die. It's not like we get to explore some interesting part of his past like in Ghost of Sparta. This game's story is just completely useless. Even Chains of Olympus, as inconsequential as most of it was, at the very least provided some context for Kratos' anger against the gods, had a decent scene with Kratos having to leave his daughter behind, and the death of Persephone was referenced by Hades in God of War 3. But this game, there's nothing about it that matters. It follows Kratos' fight against the Furies, 3 sisters whose job it is to keep the oaths sworn by mortals to gods. Considering Kratos killed off most of the Greek pantheon, it makes sense that there's not going to be some absolutely fantastic new villain, but really? I mean, there were still some notable gods left that weren't killed, such as Demeter, Apollo, and Hestia. They could have done better than these 3 nobodies, I'm just saying. I wish I had a lot to say, but truthfully, there weren't many story moments in the game at all. Essentially, it's just Kratos trying to fight back when they come after him and he disobeys his oath to Ares, then they imprison him, then he breaks out and stops them. There's also Orcos, the son of the Furies, who helps out Kratos in a fight against his mothers. It's interesting how he's one of the only characters in the Greek saga who always helps and never betrays or harms Kratos, but he's really not that interesting of a character. He's not bad or anything, but when he only shows up like 4 times in a game that's already pretty light on story or cutscenes, it's hard for me to truly care about an ending where Kratos has to kill him for some strange contrived reason. Your mother's made you the Oath Keeper and you can't do anything about it? Yeah, right, the writers just needed a reason to get rid of you because you never appear again in the other games. This is yet another reason why making a prequel in this period makes 0 sense. The one moment of the whole story that I liked was when Kratos Spartan kicks a Fury pretending to be a general in what feels like a reference to 300. Now, I haven't seen that movie, but I know of that famous scene, and it made me chuckle a bit to see it replicated here. So with a boring and forgettable story that has no reason to exist, we should at least hope for the gameplay and presentation to be top-notch. Right? Well, before you go into the comments section and talk about how what I'm about to say is too mean and harsh, keep in mind that this game came out 3 years after God of War 3. This was no spin-off, this was the next full entry in the franchise, pretty much God of War 4. 3 years is the same gap between God of War 2 and 3, where they also had to account for developing for a brand new console in HD for the first time. So I think it's fair to expect some greatness from Ascension. First off, the graphics really aren't that great in my opinion. Now, it does look fine in general for a PS3 game, but I'd argue at many moments it either looks the same or worse than God of War 3, which again came out multiple years before, and the set-piece variety is really what hurts it. It's embarrassing. Not only does the game's frame rate get weird whenever you use a special attack, but the game doesn't make up for its unimpressive technical side with its creative side. The game essentially consists of 3 major areas that you spend tons of time in, and that's it. You spend the entire opening, the midway boss fight, and the ending in the prison created by the Furies, which is a cool idea for a set piece in general. It's a giant 8-armed man turned into a jail for people who disobey the gods. How the hell do you screw that up?
Oh, sorry everyone. I'm just trying to get a really good and up-close and detailed view of what's on that TV.
Yeah, the damn camera is awful. The entire first boss fight is lame as hell and one of the worst in the series. There are some frustratingly hard ones, there are some forgettable basic ones, but this one is both. This is not an exciting or interesting fight. Hell, I don't even know what the hell it is I'm fighting, nor is it fair or fun. It's extremely difficult in my opinion due to the camera zooming so far out that I can't even see where Kratos is or tell him apart from the little minions. That's quite a problem. The middle boss fight is alright and a lot better even if it's not that interesting, and the final boss is pretty cool in all honesty, but it simply doesn't cut it in my opinion. The final boss is very cool in terms of the stuff Kratos does during it, but most of it is just QTEs, so it doesn't feel like I'm actually fighting anything. The fully interactive parts of the fight are extremely uninteresting, so this feels like a glorified cutscene. Plus, the low stakes induced by the uninteresting villains really don't help it. The only other boss is against some old dude with a little shriveled tumor on his side within the Temple of Delphi, which is probably the most in-depth in terms of the combat, but it's incredibly frustrating due to the sheer lack of clarity in terms of what exactly you're supposed to do to avoid his attacks, and then for the more cinematic sliding moments afterwards, which feeds into a major problem that we'll get into shortly. The Temple of Delphi is one of the other major areas in the game, and it's full of these lame quote-unquote puzzles where you need to sniff some Joker gas in order to find the path forward. It's a little cool the first time, similar to the Amulet of Ouroboros later on that can heal and decay the status of an object, but neither of these are used in any creative ways for most of the game. It mainly boils down to walking out to the right thing and waiting for an animation to finish. No joke. And finally, we have the Statue of Apollo, where you literally spend half of the game. Did they learn nothing from the first game? In fact, that's not actually a fair comparison. This is way worse because there are no interesting shifts in the theming of different segments. It's just one long slog. I kind of like some of the puzzles in it and how they use the cool mechanic of creating a copy of Kratos to hold down a switch or chain or things like that, and certain ones surprised me with how I had to solve them, but otherwise, this statue is absolute garbage. By the end, I was dreading every single room because I knew I'd have to fight another army of annoying enemies, and that's really what I want to talk about with regard to this game. The game has no reason to exist, it has the worst story in the franchise, it has disappointing graphics, forgettable music, and practically no variety in terms of locations, but it could still be saved by the combat, right? Well, I'm sorry to say, but this is the worst combat in the series. But why? Well, it really comes down to three major things. Number 1, the parry system has been given the Taco Bell bathroom treatment and has been completely obliterated. For some reason, the geniuses behind this masterpiece decided it would be a good idea to strip down the parry system and make it a lot more difficult. Now, instead of automatically getting a parry when you block at the perfect moment, you have to hold down the block button and press a button at the right moment. Oh, and it doesn't even work 99% of the time. I was able to get maybe like 5 parries in the whole game, whereas I was usually able to get more than 5 per fight in the other games. That's embarrassing. It totally ruins the flow of combat and leads to the feeling of just holding L1 the entire fight being the safest option, which sucks. This is even worse than the first game, where you could at the very least knock an enemy back sometimes for blocking properly. Number 2, the dodging feels like you're on methamphetamine. Not only does it suck to block, but you can no longer rely as much on the dodge either. Dodging is an integral part of the combat of these games, but here it feels a lot floatier and less precise. Not to mention, you can no longer dodge out of a crowd of enemies or the Medusa's gaze as easily. Maybe they thought it would make the game more challenging, but these things were always meant to be overly tough challenges that you'd be able to stop by becoming more defensive. It forced you to switch up your strategy in a clever way, but here it feels like you're just getting piled on the entire time, and it's insanely annoying. Number 3, Kratos sucks in this game. And no, I don't mean he's returning the favor to the architect from the first game. I mean his weapon and abilities are pathetic here. Yeah, that's right, I said weapon, not weapons, because for some fucking reason, instead of having multiple cool weapons like in every single other game in the entire series, Kratos gets 4 elements for his Blades of Chaos, which is a dumb idea in the first place, but the fact that they all feel kind of the exact same, and you have to upgrade them to unlock their magic abilities makes it even worse. This means that as you unlock elements, they aren't on an even playing field with the first one you unlocked, so you're probably just going to stick with that one, especially since they all feel the exact same anyways. Plus, you're a lot more limited in how much magic you can use, the items you unlock have extremely lame uses in combat that are total afterthoughts, and the rage meter. The rage meter in this game makes me rage more than anything. It builds up the more you attack enemies without getting hit. This is an alright and interesting idea, I suppose, but it really doesn't work in this game due to how consistently you'll get hit and how weak most of the rage attacks end up being. It seriously made me audibly say, wow, I really hit all of those enemies perfectly just for that? In conclusion, God of War Ascension should be called God of War Ascension. This game is legitimately bad, not mediocre, not alright, but forgettable, and certainly not good. This game has annoying combat that's worse than even the original game from 8 years before, no truly great locations, a camera that should be tried for war crimes, and a laughably lame story. There's very little I can praise beyond the typical God of War staples such as cool moments and good voice acting, but even Troy Baker can't save this game from a 2 out of 5. Apparently there was also a multiplayer mode, but that's since been taken down, so I can't really comment on it. It might be an explanation for the weird mechanical changes and lack of depth within the single-player mode, but it does not excuse them. There's also an included demo for The Last of Us. Let's try it out. Maybe it'll help me wash the bad taste out of my mouth from this bucket of crap. Alright, so that's a disaster, but let's see what else we can find in this box. Holy mother of God. Wow, okay. This is like finding a diamond buried in a turd. You son of a bitch. I should have known not to trust you. Welcome. I see you've completed your mission. Yeah. And I can tell you were trying to break my spirit with that last godforsaken abomination of a game. I always knew you had something up your sleeve. Well, you may not have arms, but still. I must say you're more clever than I expected, Mr. TGB. But now comes the question. Are you going to accept your reward? You mean the axe? Yeah, I'll take it. Gladly. Give her ear. Alright, here you go. Well, thanks. Now, I suppose I'll just have to get attacked by the mythical spirit that you've summoned using this thing, huh? Wait, what? Okay. Oh yeah, I found out about that. I found out that you're secretly trying to kill me by giving me this, and that you really only wanted to use me to playtest your crappy game, and you're gonna release it to the masses as one compilation of every horrible thing about the God of War series. I knew you had a nefarious plan, and while it's extremely stupid, that seems about right for you. Damn it! My convoluted plan has been foiled yet again! But what are you going to do now? You've already done everything I could ever hope you would. Just because you survived doesn't mean I haven't truly failed. Well, I'm too lazy to actually do something more complicated, so I'm just gonna do this. Well, there you go. I guess the Germany ball is finally dead. And a new era begins. Seems about right. Alright, everyone. Thanks for watching. Sorry, but he's dead. So, hope you like the new me. And see you in the next video, I guess.